Welcome to the Sci-ROI 2020 virtual event. Today, we are going to have an interview with Dr. Amitavo Mitra, who is a patent attorney by profession. He is currently an associate partner at Saikrishna and Associates, a prestigious law firm in Delhi. Dr. Mitra has followed the same path that many of us has walked in, that is, the traditional path of academia and bench sciences. But at a later stage, he shifted tracks and went into the uncharted territories of non-traditional scientific career. More interestingly, he did this transition even before the non-traditional careers received the spotlight that it has now. Today, Dr. Mitra had joined us to share the story of his non-traditional scientific career. Welcome, Dr. Mitra.
Hi, good morning, everyone.
Thank you, Dr. Mitra, for joining us today. Please tell us a bit more about your background in science.
Yeah, so I finished my schooling in '99, and then straight after schooling in Delhi, I went to US for my undergrad, and I did my undergrad at University of New Hampshire, where I majored in biology. And right from college, I always knew that I wanted to pursue science, and I then got an admission to the PhD program at Dartmouth College in New Hampshire. And I was in the biology department, and I did my PhD from the biology department in Drosophila genetics, phototransduction genetics. And I finished my PhD in 2011, followed by which then I did about a 2-year postdoctoral fellowship at Tufts Medical Center in Boston. And that was the end of my career in science, so as to speak, in traditional science. So that's briefly like my path or my education in science.
Sounds good. So during this, this career, when did you start thinking of moving back to India, and what inspired you for making the decision? And
Right.
then if I just may add, like, what was the most challenging part of this transition?
Right. So even back when I was doing my undergrad, I always had it in the back of my mind that I do want to go back to India at some point. Now, I did not have any like a fixed date or a time frame when I would like to go back. But unlike a lot of people I knew who did not want to come back to India of all places, I knew I wanted to come back, but I just didn't know under what circumstances or under what position I would come back. And even during my PhD, I always was thinking of coming back. Like I was open to the idea that if something works out in US or anywhere else, I will go for it. But going back to India would be an equally good opportunity for various reasons. And what precipitated this was while I was doing my postdoc. Around almost 2 years into it, the funding in the lab had run out. And then I was at a crossroads and sort of, do I continue my postdoc in a different lab, or is this the right time for me to get out and try and actually find a career? And I think that was the catalyst which made the decision, which made me look out for to go out. And I think that is where I was looking at things in India also. And while things were moving slow in US also, that's when I decided that I will just come back to India and focus my energies on finding something here.
What did you decide to shift tracks into a more non-academic career path, that is patent law?
Right. So I think during my PhD in my like 4th year or 5th year, I think that's when I had sort of decided that I don't want to be in like hardcore science anymore, at least in academics, so as to speak of. And I think around that time, also around 2009, 2011, around that time, at least in US and slightly in India, a lot of opportunities were coming up in like consulting, in law, and also like in clinical research. So even back then, I would say they were not really considered non-traditional source opportunities. They were just like alternates, and especially in the academic setting, people were more and more aware of these things, that you don't have to become a professor, or that if you don't become a professor, you are a failure. Right? Because in academics, we always think that the holy grail or the only thing we can do is become a professor. And the reality is that it's very, very challenging in US or even in India to secure a position. And there are equally available other opportunities which are equally respected, well-paying, and everything. So not for those reasons, but like I didn't want to stay in science anymore because I just found it like slow. The turnover rate in like research is quite slow, especially in life sciences. So at that time only, I had made up my mind that I'm not going to stay in science for as a career option. But I still wanted to do a postdoc to build on my experience of somewhat independent research, so as to speak of. And the law actually happened quite late. That was not even on my radar. But when I came back to India and was looking at various opportunities, talking to people, and I was still looking at academic positions in India because that's all we know, right? And talking to some people, somebody mentioned, so why don't you go into like patent law? They require a lot of scientists and people with science background. And at that time, I was like, what is patent law? I mean, I have vaguely heard of it, but I have no idea. And then I started to find out about it, and it seemed like it was something where I would use my knowledge also, the technical knowledge, and that was really important for me to. Even though if I was shifting a career, that I did want to use what I have done in the past, like 8-9 years. So that was an important aspect, and I think the patent law does provide. To a large extent, to practice what you have learned and done in the lab.
I see. So to follow up on that, you do have an like a LLB degree from the Delhi University, right? So
Right.
what criteria were needed to apply for that degree?
So in India, to do a law degree, like a graduate degree, is basically you just need an undergraduate degree in anything. So in terms of criteria, just like in US to do a JD, it's pretty low, or it's a very minimum requirement that you should have a graduation, you should have a college degree. That's about it, because the law degree is a general degree you get in India and worldwide. So in India, it was just you take an entrance exam, you clear it, and then you're enrolled in the program. And it's a 3-year program.
After your law degree at Delhi, did you immediately started applying to the different law firms around, or how did you go about finding a job?
Yeah, so actually, the good thing about patent law is that a law degree is not essential to do the job. Because typically, a lot of the science people, whether you have a master's or you have a PhD, you enter as a technical associate, where you are recruited for your technical science inputs and not so much in the law. And of course, over the time, you're expected to pick up the law also, because that's going to be your career. And a lot of people also do a law degree for various reasons. Else, like, it just gives you a better understanding of how law works and how science comes in. So when I started in 2013 in law, or in this field, I did not have a law degree, and I wasn't required to either. So I worked for about 2 years, and then I did my law. It was basically I worked all day and then went to law school in the evening. And once you and I believe it's similar in US also. A lot of PhD or postdocs who are hired in law firms, they are fresh out of graduate school or postdoc, and then they do their law degree over the next few years. So now and then once you have the law degree, you can apply the law also, and your role also changes within the firm, and you do then both. You are a lawyer and also a science person.
So during this transition from being a complete bench scientist to a patent lawyer, what was the hardest obstacle that you had to tackle, and how did you overcome that challenge?
I think it may be very unique for me. I don't know, but like in science, what I see is that you if somebody says something in what they have found or reporting, you tend to take it on the face value, and you don't question it like that you must be lying. And even though in science, I think the last few years there have been certain controversies where people have fudged data and been like, they have done some things which are unethical. But by and large, a science, I would say, not just life sciences, but sciences is generally a very trusting community. But I think in law, I can say, people are nice, but in law, you have to question everything, even a basic statement like, like 2 plus 2 is 4. You still have to question, like, why is it 2 plus 2 4? Like in science, you say, like in biology, you say, the protein is made from like mRNA. You don't question that. You read something in a book and it's a fact and you don't question it. But in law, or in patent law, in law generally, like you have to question everything. And I think that was one of the hardest things for me to adapt in this field, was that initially, somebody makes a statement, you don't question it. You assume that person is speaking truthfully. But in law, you have to question everything, and not because the other person is not truthful about it, but he may or may not be right about it. So I think that kind of a mindset, it took me some time to get over it, that you have to always be questioning. And it is similar in science also, right? You question things as to why things are in a certain way, but it's more practically applicable, at least in my experience.
As a kind of follow-up question to that, so what skills and training that you received while working at the bench is now useful as a patent lawyer?
So if we speak about some of the hard skills, like techniques, we know, or what is going on in the field, I would say that is not of much use, because obviously if I'm doing some experiments, I'm not going to continue doing that. But a lot of the soft skills you learn during your PhD are very, very useful, such as, you can, when you are in law or in science, when you are bombarded with a lot of data, that, in your PhD, you learn how to make sense of it, how to manipulate it, and how to frame a question, forming a hypothesis, and then having a plan to go about and answering it. And also just having the critical thinking abilities which you develop, in your PhD or in a postdoc, where there's no one to spoon feed you or guide you that do this, do that. It's up to you to figure out some idea of what is going on outside based on all the information, what is important, what is not. And I think those skills which we pick up during a PhD, and we don't even realize that, we are becoming very good, or we are becoming adept at those kind of things. Those are some of the skills which I feel really sets apart a person who has an advanced degree in science. And those skills can be very readily applied in any domain outside science, including in law, where this self initiation of work and keeping track of everything, and just the critical thinking ability. So that is really important. Anybody can pick up law or any other subject, but the way you think, the way you approach a topic, so that is something PhD or a postdoc really trains you for like 5 years, 8 years, 9 years, and that is a really important skill which can be readily applied in law. And that's, I think, something really which sets apart a graduate student who is doing this, doing law, compared to like an undergraduate or a master's student who did not have that much exposure to critical thinking.
So, could you describe a bit more about your day-to-day activities as a patent lawyer?
Right. So the activities, they evolve over time, obviously. But like, so when I started, a lot of my work or my job profile was related to speaking to inventors, or like reviewing like patent documents in terms of the science. So let's say someone has discovered or invented a new antibody. Let's say they discovered an antibody against COVID, right? And they want to patent it. And so my initially in this career, the job would be to analyze that science and see whether the technical details, they make sense or not, whether the conclusions being drawn, are they supported by the data or not, whether they are over concluding or are they overreaching, which and they are not being supported by the data. So it is in the initial years, it is basically just to ensure that the science is solid. You are almost like a reviewer, right? And you give them certain inputs on what is required, what is not required, because what goes into a patent specification is very different from like a publication. There are some differences, but the main role initially is to like sort of look at the science and make sure it's solid. to the best extent you can. It's not like a great technical review, like in detail, like a reviewer job, but you're still trying to understand the science and make sure that everything is there what is required. And then over time, you sort of learn the science, learn the law part also, and then you apply the principles of patent law and make sure that the technical part is in support and in sync with the law requirements. And then you can slowly graduate into drafting patent applications, which are an equal part technical and a legal document. And as time goes on, you realize it's more and more of a legal document than science. And I think, and then, I did my law, and now my role is more on the legal side. I still do the science part. I love doing it. And I have branched out into science streams apart from my core domain. But now it's more about advice. Now my role more is on advising clients and inventors on the legal aspects of patent law, like how they can go about protecting their invention, not just in their home country, but in other countries. The legal strategy they should take, like licensing opportunities, prosecution of the application. So once an application is filed, it is examined. There are a lot of objections, how to overcome it. So basically now my role is more into like strategy and advising clients on how to go about the whole process. So that's like the evolution from where you start and where you can end up.
Okay, so for a person who is interested in patent law right now, and if he's interested in transition from science into this career, what kind of resources are available in India to do this transition?
So in terms of resources, so there are two aspects of it. One is the general awareness, and the other is the direct resources available in colleges. So I don't know if people would be aware that in the last couple of years, the present government has made a lot of policy changes and introduced new policy to try and really encourage intellectual property rights in India. Because until now, this has been a really niche area in India, and a lot of people, a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of inventors didn't really know about it or its value. But looking at the globalization right now, especially how it is affecting India, people are realizing that IP or patents are really, really important to secure your rights and sort of to play on the global field. And so a lot of efforts are being made in universities, even schools, and even in companies where people are being sensitized about IP. For a person in college or like in a university who's a student who's interested in IP and wants to enter in the IP, which can be a law firm or it could be a government body. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of support from the colleges in terms of placement or like a career office or something. Most places don't have it. But the best way to get into it is to basically go for internship. For technical people, it is still difficult to do an internship because the timelines just don't allow it. You're doing your college and then you graduate. So the best way would be to read about it, and I think I see a lot of people on LinkedIn now, and that's a very good platform to find people who are in a particular domain. And you can look up their whole life history on LinkedIn because they post it, and that really helps to connect people. And people are really helpful also to give their inputs and guide them. And especially now with a lot of WhatsApp and a lot of online things like job postings, it's really become a lot easier to connect and get to know about jobs and everything compared to what it was maybe 10 years ago. So the best way would be to reach out to law firms, check out their websites, network, and then apply for positions.
Sounds like a good plan. So in your opinion, what is the current scenario of non-traditional science careers, specifically, let's say, patent law in India? So is it like highly competitive, or, where is it going? Is it, like a growing culture? So if you can give your thoughts on that.
Right. I think the first thing I would say that, as in 2020, we should stop saying that these are non-traditional options. I think these are equally viable career options, and many a times I would say these are more attractive than going down the academic path. I am surely people have heard and will talk about it why, but I think it's an equally attractive option. In India, I think there is a lot of scope, and this IP or in patents have really picked up in the last, I would say, 6-7 years, especially in patent law. And there are a lot of opportunities. It's a very fast growing field, and I think as India becomes a global major market for a lot of MNCs from outside, and it's a big market, right? It's a top 5 global markets. So more and more people would want to secure their investments and protect their rights. So I think in patent law, it's a very bright prospect. And I think the golden age of patent law in India is, I think, yet to come. So there are a lot of opportunities. And in terms of competitiveness, I would say it's in terms of the industry, it is very fragmented in that there are like a lot of players. But if you want to count some of the good firms or the good people who are doing this, there may be a handful. And of course, everybody wants to get into these top places. But I think what's important is that if you're a good candidate, if you know your stuff and you can present yourself, um, you can get into wherever you want. Of course, a luck also plays a factor in being in the right place at the right time. But I think like any other field in India or elsewhere, things are competitive, and especially if you want to get into a good place. Yeah.
We would like to conclude this by asking you a more personal question. What do you think is the silver lining of going back to India?
I think the silver lining, I think it can vary. Sorry, it can vary from people to people. But I think one of the biggest thing is that all your family is here. So you can always instead of just calling them every weekend or every day, your parents and your siblings and everybody's there. So I think that's an intangible which really cannot be measured for someone living abroad and someone living in India. So, and also like for me, it has been like I'm living in my own country. I am not a foreigner. I mean, I lived in US for 13 years, but at least I never got the feeling that this is my place. I mean, so I think it can vary for people to people and like what their priorities are. But for me, I think it has been, and of course, there are a lot of challenges living in India compared to US. But I think there are, in terms of the advantages, there are more intangibles which cannot be compared. I would say for living in India versus living in US or any other developed economy. Yeah.
This concludes our interview for today. Thank you, Dr. Mitra, for joining and sharing your experience with us. We wish you all the best for your new adventures, and we hope you achieve all the success you deserve. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.